And so let me just show you. I want to show you some clips today of elites with their heads planted so far up their backsides that you may not be able to hear their voices. I mean, here is just a hilarious piece. I just want to show you how rigidly, how completely, with how much effort they want to silence the voices of the people they are supposed to serve. Okay, there's a climate change meeting. It started yesterday. It's in Poland. So of course everybody flew to the climate change meeting, emitting what they say are 55,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gas that the UN officials are trying to keep from accumulating in the atmosphere. This thing is just absolutely. But elites get to do this because they are talking about climate change. So the fact that they're destroying the climate with their jet planes and their traveling, that doesn't matter. So David Attenborough, right? He is the famous naturalist. He's done a lot of these PBS specials. He's become very famous. He gets up and gives a speech. Listen carefully to what he is telling the gathered poobahs of climate panic.
Right now, we're facing a man-made disaster of global scale. Our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change. If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. The world's people have spoken. Their message is clear. Time is running out. They want you, the decision makers, to act now. They're behind you, along with civil society represented here today, supporting you in making tough decisions, but also willing to make sacrifices in their daily lives.
The people are behind you, they support you, and they're willing to make sacrifices. So let's go from there to Paris, where the people were asked to make the sacrifice of paying an extra tax on their petrol, on their gasoline. Let's go where our friends from Rebel Media are covering the support of the people for the sacrifices that you have to make in order to get the elites to stop gabbing about climate change. Here they are.
We're outside the Arc de Triomphe. You might see I'm squinting my face a little bit. There's tear gas everywhere, and obviously I don't have goggles. We were planning a quiet morning, filming, expecting the protests to start in the afternoon, but they've started early. It's probably going to get a lot more intense than this, but I was receiving messages from French people again last night, and what's amazing about this protest is the polls show that up to 85% of people in France actually support this movement. I mean, understandable. Taxes are insane, and there's more being proposed. But what I also was sent was footage of police officers removing their helmets in protest and in solidarity with the people marching here. Big movement. It's only starting. I'm sure it'll get bigger during the rest of the day.
The people are behind you. Unfortunately, they're coming up behind you with a gigantic club, which they're going to beat you into the ground because they don't think climate change is worth paying extra taxes for. So get the tear gas ready. Otherwise, you're going to be hearing the voice of the people shouting in your ear. You'll hear how much they support you as they pick you up and throw you into the sand. I mean, could people be any more clueless? Could they be any more? The people are behind you, ready to make the sacrifices that they, oh my goodness, here they come. I must go. So long. I'm running away now. You know, there used to be a funny story about one of the great television writers. There still is a funny story about one of the great television writers, Stephen Cannell. And I got to know Stephen just a few years before he died. We became kind of pals. And he's the guy who wrote the Rockford Files, and he wrote the A-Team. He was just a major contributor to television. And there was a story about him pitching an idea. I think it was about illegal immigration. I think it was about immigrants, you know, coming into the country or something. He was pitching this idea in a room, and somebody said, well, what do you do about all the complex politics? Because it was a comedy. And he said, what do you do with all the complex politics and all the kind of edgy stuff? And Stephen said, we won't write it. I think that is what the news media is doing with these riots in Paris. These riots, I mean, what has happened is Emmanuel Macron said that somehow they had to cut back. This carbon tax thing is very, very popular among the elites. They love the idea of carbon tax. They think it's going to save the world. And so the French who don't really pollute all that much in the first place, and their driving doesn't pollute all that much, but it pollutes a higher percentage than in Germany, because Germany idiotically shut down all their nuclear power plants. So because they got scared of the disaster in Japan, so they shut down one of the safest, least polluting energy sources they had, and now they can say, oh, you know, our cars are not as polluting as our other things because they shut down their clean nuclear power plants. So in France, he wanted to cut down how much pollution was coming out of their cars, puts on this tax. The poor people there, you know, they got something like an 8%. I don't remember the exact number, but it's like an 8% unemployment. Their GDP is under 2%. So they're not doing very well. And the last thing they need is a tax, especially out in the countryside where you need your car to get to work. So what do the networks here do? They just don't, they do what Canal said, they just don't write it. Here are the nets reporting on these riots. Listen to what you don't hear. You don't hear climate change. You don't hear environment. You don't hear anything. Only one of them even mentions that a fuel tax set this off.
Remarkable images overseas tonight, the protests gripping Paris. Body cam video showing police rushing to the famous Arc de Triomphe where protesters were vandalizing the monument. Protesters known as Yellow Jackets are angry about rising gas prices and living costs in France. The biggest crisis yet for Emmanuel Macron. The government is considering imposing a state of emergency.
Tonight, no end in sight to the turmoil across France, including more confrontations with police. These ambulance drivers today joining the largest anti-government demonstrations here in decades. What began as a protest against President Emmanuel Macron's plan to raise fuel taxes, growing over the weekend into a movement fueled by rage. Anger from those who say his policies favor the wealthy. Streets barricaded, cars lit on fire, snipers perched on rooftops. Police body cameras capturing this clash at the Arc de Triomphe. Riot police battling with protesters clad in yellow vests.
I love it. So they just leave it out. So finally, Macron caved. He has delayed the tax increase for 6 months. This is the first time he's ever backed down on any of his plans, because in France, you know, you're going to deal with rioters because they basically don't understand that money has to be made in order to be spread around. So anytime you ask them to work hard or anything like this, but in this case, this is Macron, the elite little fascination they have with this climate change thing, which is going to have to be solved by technology anyway. I mean, this is the thing about this. It's not that there's no climate change. I don't think anybody knows how much of it is caused by human endeavor, but certainly some of it. We do pollute, we do change the environment. But none of these plans, the experts say none of these plans is going to do anything. What really is going to have to happen is there's going to have to be some technological innovations, batteries that store solar power better, and things like that are going to cut this stuff down. All this is virtue signaling. It's virtue signaling on the backs of the poor. That's what it is. It's virtue signaling on the backs of the poor. So finally, Macron blinked. But what I love about this is Attenborough is in Poland telling people, the people are behind you. Clearly, the people are behind you on the streets, ready to throw you, tar and feather you, and throw you into the Seine. And the networks handle that. They just don't report it. The Canal method. They just don't write it. And that way the voice of the people doesn't exist if you don't hear it. And the